Hello and welcome to the Ham Radio Guy. We're doing a special podcast this evening as we are going to be talking with Robert Wareham N0ESQ from Asheville, North Carolina, to discuss how progress has been going, what he's been up to, and why it's important to get to know your neighbors. So let's go ahead and invite Robert into the channel here. And we are got Robert here with us this evening, N0ESQ. Good evening, Robert.
Good evening. Nice to be here with you.
Absolutely good. Thank you for joining us this evening in this podcast channel. So I happened to see you a couple weeks ago on Ham Nation, and I really found your story very fascinating and very interesting. And I really wanted to be able to share it with more people and more listeners, and just how you brought your neighbors together and how they came to to get to know you during this event and time of need and disaster, and I kind of the level of how well did you know them beforehand and how well have you really got to know them now, because I just how many people sometimes are living in a neighborhood, maybe they don't know their people real well around them, they just come and go, they do their own thing, but sometimes you really do depend on them. I mean, I was gone a couple weeks ago. I'd happened to have some medication left on a porch step, and I was like, I'm not going to be back home for 2 days. And it's like, well, I just don't want that left there. I was able to call a neighbor about 3-4 houses down and say, hey, can you come grab that? I'll pick it up in a few days. And I just found how important that was to get to know them. But it's not just for simple, hey, can go pick up my mail while I'm gone? But it's also times like this with Hurricane Helene that you've been able to really get to know your neighbors and work with them and know more and more. So tell me a little bit about your story, how things have progressed there a little bit, and we'll ask some more questions along the way as well.
Sure. Well, let me just sort of set the stage for you. I moved here from Panama in January of this year. I live about 15 miles southeast of Asheville, North Carolina, in a little community called Fairview. If you were to look at a map of North Carolina and you compare it to the news accounts, you would see there was sort of a path that this storm took.
Right.
We all know the dirty side of the storm is the northeast quadrant. So
Yes.
the eye was off to the west of us, but the northeast quadrant moved over and came in to the south of us from the towns of Lake Lure, Chimney Rock, Bat Cave, and you can almost look at it on a map in much the same way you would tornado path up
Right.
through the Garin Creek area of Fairview and then into Swannanoa and Black Mountain. So if you were to look at a map, you'd go, hey, those are all sort of in a north-south line there. So you can just see right where that northeast quadrant moved through. Now, when it
Right.
comes to neighbors, if you had asked me a month ago who my neighbors are, I would have said, 4 or 5 people that live here on Falcon Crest Drive, where there's only about 6 homes. But when the storm came, the radius of neighbor expanded.
I
And
bet.
the reason I say that is we were all without communication. We could not drive anywhere. We could not. Our closest town is Fairview. It's 5 miles away. It's a 10-minute drive. 5 miles, mountain road, has gas station, post office, supermarket, that sort of thing. We couldn't
Sure.
get there. The road was washed out completely in one spot, but in multiple places we had lost at least one lane, and in one place that one lane had fallen over 150 feet down.
Wow.
Very steep. So we couldn't get out. We were stuck here. We had no electricity. The AT&T traditional landline cable was lying in the middle of Garin Creek Road, shredded. Spectrum cable doesn't come out this far, but they're down farther in there. And so it was really, really incredible. And there was no moon. The rain stopped on Friday afternoon of the 27th, okay? And we haven't had a drop of rain since then.
Wow.
In 27 days, we have had nothing but blue skies and 60 to 70 degree temperatures since then, which has been a tremendous blessing.
I was going to say that's probably a real asset though, because
Oh.
if you continue to have more rain, you create more problems.
Oh,
At least
yeah.
this way you can start to get in there and start to do some cleanup, some repairs.
Yeah,
Get some things taken care of. You get a few people in there doing things versus if it's raining every other day, or that you're still having those type of issues.
The Lord has blessed us with just fantastic weather.
Absolutely.
One of the things they did, and they talk about, and in amateur radio and in disaster response, we talk about be prepared to survive for 72 days on your own.
72 hours.
72 hours, not 72 days. 72 days on your own. Take that to heart, folks. Okay. I went the day before the storm and got 10 gallons of gas, figuring, that'll last me a couple of days in the generators. I got 10 gallons of bottled water in 5-gallon bottles that I could put a pump on.
Oh, sure.
So I was relatively prepared. We have lots of canned goods and frozen foods. By 72 hours, we still weren't able to get to town.
Wow.
Right? And
I mean, could you do anything like ATV or anything like that to get around? Or
no. I mean, if I were to show you pictures, these were. I mean, we were ATVing between neighbors, and that's what happened when I first walked down and saw this. It looked like an explosion. And in fact, I will tell you, in several places around the area, it looks like micro tornadoes dropped because the trees are just shredded. It's like an upside down blender came down and just spun these trees. So what happened is these neighbors, we could get to each other, but we couldn't get out.
Wow.
And
you only have one road in, one road out, basically?
That's Garin Creek Road. Look at it on a map. Garin Creek Road. One in, one out. And up at the other end, it dead ends in another area. These are the back roads. This is the mountains of North Carolina. This is how we get around. I go that way to get to the doctor. I go that way to get to Sam's Club. Or I go that way to get to town. But that main road, Garin Creek Road.
That's all you got.
That's all I got. So the first thing my wife and I did is we hopped in the Polaris. We got a little Polaris Ranger. We just started checking the immediate neighborhood to see if anybody had a tree fall on their house or anything. We knew one neighbor, and they were our next door neighbor up there, and we just met the ones across the street maybe 2 weeks earlier.
Wow.
And so we ran into the other neighbors at the top of the hill, and we didn't know them. There was a widow that lived up the hill. We knew her a little bit because we walk our dogs up there. And so Jen said, we need to get our radios and pass them out. I have a bunch of Motorola blister pack GMRS radios.
Oh, sure. Like the little handheld you get from like a
Costco.
Like Walmart or like a Costco or something like that, right?
Yeah. So I went home and got those. I had about a dozen of them. I handed them out to the neighbors. I said, look, let's all just stay in touch this way. If you need anything. And I have it programmed into one of my radios back here. So I actually started doing a welfare net about 3 times a day. 7 in the morning, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 7 in the evening. Yeah. Just asking people, do you need anything? What have you heard? Are you doing okay?
So if somebody wanted to get a hold of you at 3 o'clock, they just have to wait till 7 o'clock to do that?
Yeah, they could call. I was monitoring it all the time. I just did a net at those times. Right. I had a portable on my hip the whole time, and I had my bases operating. So, but we were out cruising around, and I thought it would take us a week to 2 weeks just to get to town. Let me tell you, these mountain people in Appalachia, they are resourceful. The first thing I saw the first day is a bunch of guys in a pickup with chainsaws. It looked like, what's that movie, the Chainsaw Massacre?
Oh yeah.
Only it was a truckload of them. And they were out there. They were cutting trees left and right. They were crossing the road. They were cutting utility poles across the road. And then a guy came along. He's an excavation contractor up about 2 miles of road. And he brought a couple of skid steers and bobcats.
Wow.
And they just started getting mud off the road. So literally within our neighborhood, within 24 hours, we could move between ourselves. Carefully.
That's good. Right.
There were big holes I happen to have some marking paint for marking utilities and things, because we went out. There were sections of Garin Creek Road where the pavement existed, but there was nothing underneath it.
Wow.
The ground had been
washed right out.
If a vehicle had driven across it, the pavement would have just gone on, the vehicle would have gone in. So we marked those. I actually had a couple of traffic cones, so we put those out in the worst places. And then we just tried to survive on our own.
Wow.
Most of us are on well water out here. So if we lose electric, we don't have water.
So do you have electric, commercial electric today on the grid, or are you still working off of generators?
We got electricity back at day 17. Okay.
Wow.
We're at, let's see, tomorrow will be 4 weeks. Exactly. The storm came in 4 weeks ago tonight. Right now, our power went off at about 6:30, and Duke Energy says it will be back at 10. I don't know if this is because they had to take it down to do some of the repairs they're doing farther up line. There's only about 400 people without power in this area,
right,
North Carolina now. So I don't know.
So it's getting better.
It's getting much better. We've had power for the last 10 days. I was able to pick up when they did open the road on about day 4, where we could at least get out. I went to Home Depot and got a generator that would do 240 volts. And then I did a little modification. You know, it's great being a ham. You know how to do stuff, right? So I open up the circuit panel. I pull out the 3 circuits that run the water well, the hot water heater, and the dryer. They're all 240 volts. My little Generac and Parallel don't do 240. They do 50 amps of 110, but they don't do 240. So I got myself a generator that does 240, and it was really great. Home Depot brought in employees from all over the Southeast so that their local employees wouldn't have to come to work.
So they could just deal with the disaster at home and whatever they're dealing with.
Everybody in the Home Depot was from Georgia, Kentucky, Texas, you name it. They were from all over. They asked for volunteers, and they were from there. Then they brought in semi-trucks full of everything you would need in a flood disaster, including generator.
I was going to say, is that stuff donated, or is that something you still had to buy? But maybe
no, we bought it, but they didn't gouge us. I mean, if it was a 6,800-watt Ryobi generator that does 240 volts, I picked it up for $850. Right. I'll have it for sale in a few weeks if anyone wants it. But I happen to have an old GE sub panel that I used to use at field day, where we ran generators and wouldn't run play. So I took that sub panel, extended the circuits to the well, the hot water heater, and the dryer into that sub panel, and then I just hooked that 240 generator up to that sub panel, and I was my wife's hero. So all you hams out there, keep a sub panel around.
Well, you know, you got to do what you got to do in times of need, you know, in disaster. So,
well, that gave us running water and it gave us hot water. I didn't take a shower for 8 days.
Well, at least you can have the basics at that point, you know. So
now, let me tell you, there's a couple of lessons that came out of this. Go to Sam's Club. Back in like where they got all the medicines and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, sure.
They sell extra large paper washcloths. They're in a box of like 4 of them, and they're in blue packages. They're like baby wipes. They're just large.
Oh, sure.
I mean, you can give yourself a great sponge bath with those things. Just keep a case of those. Keep a case of those on the shelves. You can wash your hands with them. You can wash your body with them. That's part of my disaster kit going forward.
Yeah. I mean,
great.
Who would have thought about something like that, you know, otherwise? So, so you had, you know, you could, I guess after day 4, you said the road started to get built back enough. They were able to, I guess,
what they did first is they filled, actually one of the locals, who's the excavation guy, was able to put a drain pipe over the complete breach. There was a 20-foot section where the road was just missing, about 2 miles down the road. And he came in, threw a drain pipe in there, and threw some rocks and sand and some metal plates over it. And actually, on I think day 3 or 4, all that could go across it was ATVs, and the sheriff was kind of regulating it. Always be nice to law enforcement. So
All
I
right.
went down and said, if you will let me cross over to get the 30 gallons of gas I have coming on the other side, I will be your slave for the remainder of the day and help as many people get supplies back and forth as you want. And he says, you have a deal, sir. So that's what I did. Is I shuttled supplies for people. They had friends and people bringing gas. There was the widow in our neighborhood who was having panic attacks. My wife was actually having to go up and sit with her at night. I mean, this is dark. There's no moon. There's no electric.
No lights.
There's no phone. There's no internet. Your cell phone doesn't work. Cellular went out all over Western North Carolina. So we actually wanted to help this lady get out because she was a little bit of a burden.
Oh, sure.
So my wife was communicating. We have Starlink at our house, so our phones could work. So we were using our phones to reach her son. And I jokingly said, he said, what can I bring you? I said, we need gasoline. He says, all right, I'll put 6 cans in my car. He lives in Cincinnati. Drove here from Cincinnati.
Wow.
Brought us 6 5-gallon cans of gas. And I said, I'll trade you 30 gallons of gas for your mother. And don't give me any of that low octane stuff or the lady gets it. But that's actually what happened. Once I cut the deal with the deputy, I shuttled some other folks back and forth. Her son showed up with 30 gallons of gas, and I went back. A friend of mine that was in my truck with her, we put her in the Polaris, and we got her out to her son. They were thrilled.
Good.
And we had 30 gallons of gas. And then we went on a mission from there. Because while I was doing this, someone told us about someone stranded on the top of a hill where the road had been completely washed out, who was confined to a wheelchair.
Oh, wow.
And I said, well, we'll go up, see how far we can get, see if we can find him. And I said, if we get there, we'll get geographic coordinates and we'll get a chopper in for him. I mean, I'm talking off the top of my head. I have no official authority. But
right.
But having been the SCC in Colorado for 10 years, I volunteered for over 15 years at the State Emergency Operations Center. I've been through these. I was in the flood in Colorado. I was through 5 worst fires of the season. I know these resources are available, so I felt confident we could get those.
Absolutely.
So we went up this road. It was unbelievable. I wish, if I hadn't been so busy driving my Polaris, I would have taken pictures. My neighbor was in the back because we grabbed a local girl to show us the way up, and she was hanging onto the oh my God handle. And we're going off through the trees because the road doesn't exist. There's some folks up there with an excavation machine trying to get a path. We get about halfway to the river. He hikes the rest of it, gets the geographic coordinates, comes down. Can't find anyone when you take them. You know, we're talking to the deputy, and he says, well, we're crowd control and traffic. Talk to the fire guys. They're in charge of rescue. We talked to the fire guys, and they were like, well, what do you want us to do? And then by a complete act of providence, my neighbor gets a text from his cousin. He said, hey, I'm in the National Guard, and I just got assigned to your incident. I'm in charge of dispatching helicopters.
Wow.
Can you believe that?
That is the true providence of God right there. That is,
and I said, give him the coordinates. And the next day, a National Guard helicopter came in, dropped the crane, picked him up, took him down to the local high school, and they took him to a hospital, and he's fine.
Wow.
So, and the only thing that happened bad out of that is I blew my tire on one of the rocks coming home.
Oh, no. Well, hopefully you got a spare able to fix that. But, how handy a side-by-sides are. And I've got one myself. I absolutely love them. They're just a wonderful tool, and they can really go, places that, you can't go otherwise. But, speaking of helicopters, you also had a Chinook come in and land basically about your front yard roughly. and they dropped off supplies. How was that kind of coordinated, or how they know where to land?
I don't know. I think maybe it was from this. No, I think it was. I think it was from the cousin of my neighbor. He said, "I think we've got a Chinook bringing in supplies." Because we didn't know where we were going to get food or water. This was, I think, day 4. It was October 1st. So that would have been day 4. Storm hit on Friday the 27th, 28th, 29th, 30th. Think about that. So this is day 4. We're cut off. Still no power. Still no phone,
nothing.
Still no internet. Nothing. And so we get the rumor that a Chinook is going to come in. I had gone. They had the road fixed enough now, so they were letting a truck go across it. So I took my neighbor. Actually, I took him down in my ATV to get his car. He'd parked it on the other side. And then he came back. And just as we were cresting the hill near our house, I look up and I see this Chinook and I go, he looks like he's having a delay. And then before I know it, I'm in the prop wash of this thing. And if you've ever been in the prop wash of a Chinook, I drive a 3/4-ton pickup, and it's shaking like, I'm getting ready to be sucked into
a vortex.
And I'm on my GMRS radio telling my neighbor following me, back up, back up, back up.
Did it land in your yard or nearby?
No. It's kind of the hills. So the way the hills are here, there's a pasture just kind of over the edge of the hill here, big, nice, wide open pasture. And it's what they had surveyed, and they said that would be a good LZ to deliver stuff. So I backed up. We both drove down here into this pasture of these neighbors who happened to have come to our house the day before or 2 days before. So we knew them now.
Right.
And so I parked my truck, and a guy in a helmet gets out. He's got the officers. He's clearly the lieutenant or something in charge. And I said, "So what's the plan?" He says, "There is no plan." He says, "We have 4 pallets of bottled water and 4 pallets of MREs. Get them where they need to go." I saluted him and said, "Yes, sir." And so they rolled him off the back ramp of this Chinook so violently that many of the cases of water ruptured into separate bottles flying everywhere. But we loaded 2 3/4-ton pickups with MREs and water. One guy went south, I went north. I went up the road where I knew there was devastation, having been up there.
Right.
I couldn't get very far, but I signaled one of the locals, and I said, "Look, I'm dumping a pile of MREs and water here. You get on your UTV, you head up the hill, let people know there's food and water down here." And I said, "I'll be back in a couple of hours." Then we went farther down the road and went door to door and delivered people a couple of cases MREs. And you know what? The feedback is those MREs aren't that bad.
I was just going to ask you that question. So how are the MREs? You're still eating?
I didn't need any. We had plenty of food, and so we made sure we just gave away all the MREs. Our little community center down here, we had a lot of them there. I mean, we were very fortunate because as hands, we think about what if.
Absolutely.
What if? I have freezers full of food. I've got shelves filled with canned food. We fed our immediate neighborhood for 4 or 5 days, and they were hot meals.
So I suppose you had a generator. Were you able to just power your refrigerator and stuff off of that for to keep food from going bad?
Yeah. So in my case, I have 2 3300i Generacs with a parallel box.
Right.
So when you tie them together, you get about 53 amps of 110 volts.
Right.
Then I had installed the day before a inlet into my circuit panel. So I shut the main off, and then I plug those in there, and I shut off all the 240 devices, and it ran the lights. I mean, I'm talking to you right now. You can't tell I'm on generator. That's the exact setup I'm on right now. Okay?
Wow.
It just wouldn't run the 240 devices. And that's where I got the separate 240 generator. And then we only ran that in the morning when we wanted to take showers, and in the evening when we wanted to run the dishwasher.
Yeah,
Because
you
it
got to be
ran
very limited. Yeah, you had limited gas. You can only run it for. You can't run it all day long, right?
I was going, well, I got my Shell Rewards credit card. I was surprised. I only spent about $200 on. Now that didn't count the 30 gallons of fuel I got free for the grandmother.
Traded for grandmother, right?
Yeah. but yeah, I mean, I spent 200. I was going through about 5 to 7 gallons a day of
Okay.
gasoline.
Well, that's good to know. I mean, at least you kind of know what to anticipate.
Well, and after day 6, I could drive into town and just get gas. I mean, it was day 6 or 7 though, because they didn't have power in town. And then once they got power in town, what do all gas stations have these days? Card readers.
Right.
They don't.
But they weren't working.
No internet.
No internet,
phone.
right?
Yeah. So along with your washcloths from Sam's Club and your 2 10-gallon bottles of water, have yourself a couple $100 in an envelope.
Yep, have some cash available, backed up for that rainy day fund.
Exactly. Have some cash on hand. I didn't have to use it because we had enough fuel, but there were some places, so we were able to get out about day 5, go refill, and then I was just refilling on a regular basis. So, I mean, it reached a point. It was annoying. The noise was really annoying. The noise of generators.
Oh, I'm sure.
But the alternative during those days was not good.
So part of my whole theme of this evening was get to know your neighbors. And
let me.
It sounds like you had got to know just a few of them, or maybe knew 1 or 2 around, maybe 4 or 5 of them around the immediate area. But you obviously got to know them much better and had a broader scope of the area of them, of who they all were during this event. And it's. I guess my question to you is, how important have you found that to really be that you could help? I mean, everybody relied on each other during this time, and how important that is what I guess I want to stress.
First of all, it's very important psychologically. Probably that was the most important thing, is for everybody, and that's why I handed out the radios. I wanted to help avoid panic. Okay.
Right.
And we're all in this together. I think my neighbors recognized that this wasn't my first rodeo when it came to disasters.
Obviously, your experience and skills in the past from being a section manager has probably helped out a lot with this.
Well, I told them, I said, here's what's going on right now, and we need to be able to survive on our own for 72 hours. Help will come. We're not some third world nation. They're going to come get us. And we had the advantage. We had generators, and I had redundant internet. I had AT&T wireline, because generally it is good and stable and reliable. It's DSL, but it's pretty rock solid. But I also already had Starlink. And so what happened is, the word got out, there's internet at this guy's house. So I made a sign, put it down on the road, directing people, and said, free Wi-Fi. And that's where that neighborhood expanded very quickly.
Right. I mean, they want to make contact with people or want to get that sort of thing.
They didn't know if their relatives who lived in the area were safe, and their relatives didn't know that they were safe. So we literally, the first 3 days, we ran the generators from morning till night. And I actually happened to have, we hams put up with our spouses criticizing us for keeping crap, right?
Right.
My wife will never criticize me for keeping scrap wire again. Wired up the sub panel. And I believe it or not, I had a Ubiquity exterior access point that was just sitting in a box that I was going to take to a ham fest. I instead dug it out, mounted it on a post on my front porch, cranked it up to full power, and pointed it at the public road.
Right.
Okay? and I created a separate VPN on my network, just called Garen Creek Open, and said, "Come on up, people." And so at any given time of the day, there was a dozen people standing in my driveway with their phones, making phone calls, texting. My neighbor's daughter was even streaming videos down to watch TV. If I'd known that, I'd have limited her bandwidth a little. But it became it. We met in a matter of 24 hours. People that we probably would not have met living here for 10 years.
Wow.
I mean, the folks that own the property where the Chinook landed, I mean, they're a third generation family.
Yep.
And, you know, the older guys are my age in their 70s, and we're like best buddies now. I went up and helped hook up their hot water heaters too. So when you can give people hot water, they like you.
Yeah, you're friends real quick.
Yeah, that's right.
So, well, that's
I told
awesome.
them when I put it in, I said, you know, this isn't a code, but neither is their road.
Absolutely. So you're able to use, you know, a lot of people have talked on different things on amateur radio about using different radios during disasters because they weren't, you know, having license for GMRS. They weren't licensed for, you know, ham radio use, but yet people have been using those frequencies and things like that. Like, were the radios you were just like the little FRS type radios or GMRS radios that you were handing out?
They were GMRS. I'm not going to answer anymore on the grounds that I might self-incriminate myself.
Nope. I get
attorney. But they were operating under my license.
Okay.
And the rules, GMRS rules, do say that in emergencies and life-threatening situations, that little scope of people who can use them is expanded.
Can be expanded, right?
So I'm not going to worry about that. If the FCC wants to come out here and find me $1 for it, I'll pay it. And I'll love the headlines that come from that.
No, absolutely. No, I'm not trying to get into too much legality. I just get kind of curious how, you know, how that was working on that sort of thing. But you know, I'm sure, I know we've seen an increase in people getting more interested in ham radio, and I'm sure GMRS. In fact, I've gotten my GMRS license. My brother had one already, but I've got one now too. Just because I think you're right, you can kind of expand the scope of what you can use. My wife's a ham as well, so I mean, I'm not too worried about that. But if I, wanted to give my in-laws or something,
let me interject here. I come from a different mindset. You know, I'm the guy that wrote the bill on auxiliary communication.
Oh, really?
In Colorado, that created the auxiliary communications unit of the Office of Emergency Management that got signed into law.
Wow.
I do not consider myself just a ham. I'm an auxiliary communicator. I use whatever communications medium is appropriate to the circumstance. If that's GMRS, if it's FRS, if it's marine radio out on the ocean, I use that. If it's HF amateur, I use that. If I'm working in conjunction with a public safety agency and I'm officially sanctioned, I use public safety frequencies.
Public safety, yeah.
I'm an auxiliary communicator. Now, I will tell you this. I had people at ARRL headquarters reaching out to me. Yep. I had Jeff Ryan, the director of Rocky Mountain Division, reaching out to me. The other lesson in this is, and what we always taught in Aries is, before you deploy, make sure your family and you are safe.
Right.
So my response to these people is, I am not a responder. In this incident, I'm a victim. So I'm not responding. I didn't log on to any nets. I took care of my family and I took care of my neighborhood. Right. I tuned in a couple of times to the local repeaters. I could hear they were running traffic. I couldn't do anything to help them. I couldn't get out. By about day 6, I started listening in. And if somebody asked for a welfare check that was near me, I'd say I'd go check on that for them.
Sure.
But by then we had USAR crews out here, Urban Search and Rescue.
Oh, yep.
I mean, they pulled up in a Humvee, or actually they were in a side-by-side, but it was a 4-seater. And these guys had come in from Alabama. And I was able to tell them, well, that guy is all right. This one's the... And so they just hung out at our house for about an hour. And, shot the
Well, they were
bull. But
probably very
they
appreciative of all that too. And I guess what I found your story so fascinating is that you're right. You kind of took care of yourself and your immediate neighborhood and everything there, and just the things that you had that mindset to be able to think, wait a minute, you know what, disaster is about to happen potentially. I need to prep myself ahead of time. But you also knew you had some stuff on hand that you needed. You didn't have to go buy a bunch more stuff. I mean, you may got some immediate bread and a bottle of water or something, but you kind of knew what you needed roughly and what you kept and otherwise. And that's the other second part of my story is I want to be able to stress is that, having a little bit of that preparation ahead of time, it just really pays off because, again, you went 4 days. You have never imagined probably going 4 or 5 days and not be able to get out from where you're at. And here you are, 4 days into it and going, I don't know what else we're going to do, but thankfully we have enough on hand and in stock to be able to make that happen. So,
not in my wildest imagination did I think ever that I'd go 4 days without being able to get access to the outside world and have supplies. Never
right.
in my wildest imagination did I think that I would go without power for 17 days. Okay? The
Yeah, that's
other
hard to
side
imagine and
of it
believe.
is, it was a tremendous psychological benefit to me to be able to help my neighbors, to not just be in a position where I could hunker down, but where I could reassure others and say, no, we'll be all right. Here, we're having dinner at our house tonight. Everybody come down. Right? Pasta noodles will last forever, and that sauce is in a jar. It tastes awfully good.
Right. So while you wouldn't consider yourself a hero, and you're not really a hero probably, but you definitely, did some great acts of kindness and things that really was able to help out your neighbors. And I'm sure that, they'll be forever indebted to you for that as well. So,
whether they are, whether they aren't, I'm glad I was able to do it.
Absolutely. I'd have the same mindset. I've always kind of been in a life of service myself, retired law enforcement, things like that. And so never truly being in a disaster like anything, seen anything like you've been through. I mean, I've been through plenty of accidents and things like that I've seen and been a part of, but never really true disaster other than the I-35 bridge in Minneapolis when that collapsed back in 2007. But that was
well. You can see on the wall behind me. Those are my badges.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's just sort of that mindset. But you don't have to be former law enforcement. You don't have to be former first responder to be ready. And I was posting on Facebook regularly. If people want to go check my Facebook post, a kind of a day-by-day account. He's back in Colorado. We're almost kidding me. It's like, well, we know now why the Lord sent you to North Carolina.
Right. Well, absolutely. So, for sure.
We're doing well. And let me I don't want to end this without acknowledging the real heartache people have gone through.
Absolutely.
11 members of one family died within 2.5 miles of my house in a mudslide.
Wow.
And a first responder and his nephew died trying to rescue them. So it's we can be humorous about it now. We can look back on it and say, yeah, we survived. But there's a lot of grief, and it's going to take a lot of people a long time to get through this.
Yeah, I mean, there was a great toll of people that passed as a result of this storm, and it's very unfortunate. And it is definitely worth a moment to remember them. So, everybody that has struggled to get through all this grief and time and just how do you start to recover and where do you begin? And it can be very overwhelming and very stressful, I'm sure, in many ways. So, I'm glad that you're okay.
If folks want to do just a little thing. The folks that died near us, the 11 family members, lived in a little town called Craigtown, Traig, Craigtown. There is a GoFundMe to help the Craig family. And if they can go on and give $5-10, that'd be great.
Awesome.
They literally wiped out multiple homes, and we lost 13 people. It's across the street from my fire department. So,
Right.
yeah,
Well, there you go,
very
folks. So if
sad.
you're listening to this or watching this later down YouTube, and you can help out that family that had a major loss of family members, please take a moment to go find that GoFundMe account. I'll try and get a link into the show notes here about that, and we'll certainly try and share that out on here too. So, well, thank you for your time this evening. I appreciate you sharing your story of getting to know your neighbors, why it's important, a little bit about preparedness and being prepared for disasters, not knowing when or where they're going to happen and where you're at, and stressing the importance of that, Robert. Thank you very much for, again, sharing all this. And I really hope that this will drive home a point to people and that they will realize your story and how things can happen and why it's so important. So,
well, and it's not only a blessing for yourself and your own family, but you feel better being able to help others.
Absolutely, yeah. It's always great to help others, and it's well worth it. So, as long as you can prep for yourself, and then be able to help others along the way when that time comes, it's important. So, and you're right, you're a victim in this as much as anybody else for having to go through and deal with all this. So, well, thank you again for your time this evening. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Hopefully, you'll get your power back on this evening, and you won't still be running on generator when you go to bed. But thank you very much for everything. And thank you for all you did for your community and your neighborhood through that time of disaster, and hope that you guys will continue to recover and build back down the road here. So
it's my pleasure, and I'm glad to do it.
All right. Thank you very much. And we will see y'all very soon. N0ESQ, Robert Wareham out of near Asheville, North Carolina. This is Marvin Turner, W0MET for the Ham Radio Guy. If you like this, please hit the subscribe button, and don't forget to put that thumbs up as well on the video. And thank you for joining us this evening here on this channel. Have a good one, and we'll talk to you all very soon.